Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're here, you're probably a fan of progression fantasy or lit RPG just like me. And today we're continuing our journey through the Dungeon Crawler Carl series by Matt Dinniman. We're on book 4, The Gate of the Feral Gods, and if you've been following this series so far, you already know it's been a wild, unpredictable ride filled with humor, chaos, and some truly insane moments. There's nothing quite like this series out there, and honestly, it's been a real treat to review each one so far. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, let me quickly bring you up to speed. The basic premise is that Earth gets pulled into this intergalactic reality show like Dungeon Crawl, where the survivors are thrown into an ever-deepening labyrinth filled with monsters, traps, and challenges, all for the entertainment of alien overlords. It sounds intense, right? Well, it is. But the charm of the series comes from Carl, our reluctant hero, and his cat, Princess Donut, who, by the way, is one of the most unique and absolutely hilarious characters you're ever going to come across. Their chemistry, along with the relentless action and progression mechanics, is what keeps fans, like myself, hooked. Now, with each book, Matt Dinniman has added layers to this universe. What started as a brutal survival story has morphed into something much larger, with sprawling plots, unexpected twists, and deeper character development. If you've stuck around for 4 books, you already know what I'm talking about. But The Gate of the Feral Gods, well, this one, it stands out for a few reasons. Some of them good, some of them not so much, and that's what we're diving into today. With that recap out of the way, I want to thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel, Mysterious Galaxies. Here I review and discuss science fiction, fantasy, and horror novels. So, welcome. With that said, let's get into what The Gate of the Feral Gods is all about, and why, despite some of the hiccups, it's still an important part of this epic series. So what's The Gate of the Feral Gods all about? Well, at its core, this book continues Carl's journey deeper into the dungeon, but it brings a new twist. The main objective for Carl and his companions this time is to capture a floating castle, a premise that, on its own, it sounds pretty epic, right? But as always with this series, things are never that straightforward. There are layers to this mission that complicates things and raise the stakes even higher. To start with, Carl's group isn't the only one tasked with capturing a castle. The dungeon has split into multiple biomes, and each biome contains its own version of a floating fortress. Different teams of crawlers are assigned to each one, meaning Carl and his team aren't just racing against monsters and dungeon traps, they're also racing against other crawlers, each in their own little micro-worlds. They're trying to accomplish the same goal. You've got our primary team battling it out in a scorching desert, another group underwater, and even one group in a haunted crypt. It's a chaotic mess, and how each group handles their own biome can affect the other teams, creating this constant sense of tension and competition. Now, you might think the plot is just a simple, let's capture the castle story, but Dinniman, as always, throws in a whole bunch of side quests and mini objectives along the way. For example, there's this titular quest, The Gate of the Feral Gods, which becomes a focal point, introducing new mysteries and challenges that tie directly into the larger arc of the series. And without spoiling too much, this quest ties into the lore of the dungeon itself, revealing more about the alien overlords and the divine beings pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's my favorite section of the book. Not Bork. Of course, no Dungeon Crawler Carl book would be complete without some of that wild, larger-than-life elements that fans have come to expect. There's no shortage of bizarre monsters to fight, insane power-ups to collect, and chaotic dungeon mechanics to navigate. Each new floor seems to push the envelope on how weird and dangerous things can get, and this book is no exception. It's an intense, high-stake race against time, with Carl and his companions constantly on the move, trying to stay one step ahead of their enemies, both human and alien. But that's where things start to feel a bit overwhelming for me. There's so much going on in this book, the multiple teams, the various biomes, the overarching quest, the mini dungeons, and all the crazy side objectives. It's a lot to juggle. At times it felt like the book was cramming too many plot lines into one story, while the variety of settings and enemies is, it's undeniably cool. It sometimes comes at the expense of deeper character moments or meaningful development. The book is constantly pushing forward at breakneck speed, which can leave you feeling like you're barely keeping up with everything. Still, the setup for the Gate of the Feral Gods is a thrilling one, with a mix of fast-paced action, complex challenges, and high stakes. If you love dungeon crawling adventures where anything can happen, this book certainly delivers. Just be prepared for the sheer volume of content thrown at you. It's a lot to take in. Here's where things get a little tricky for me. On the positive side, everything that made me fall in love with Dungeon Crawler Carl is still present in the Gate of the Feral Gods. The dialogue, for instance, remains sharp and witty and full of that delightful mix of humor and tension that fans of the series have come to expect. The banter between Carl and Princess Donut continues to be one of the highlights of the book. It's always refreshing to see how the two of them interact under pressure, whether they're strategizing mid-battle or just having casual, sarcastic exchanges that help keep the tone light in the midst of all of the chaos. And speaking of chaos, the action of this book, it's relentless. If you're someone who thrives on fast-moving plots and constant high stakes, you'll find plenty to love here. Every chapter is packed with battles, new abilities, and insane power-ups that push the limits of the characters. We also get the usual RPG mechanics that make the series so unique. Carl and the other crawlers are constantly evolving, leveling up, and finding new gear to help them tackle increasingly difficult challenges. It's progression fantasy at its core, and Dinniman knows how to keep that momentum going. You never feel like the characters are stagnant, and there's always something new to look forward to as they continue their journey deeper into the dungeon. And of course, I can't talk about Dungeon Crawler Carl without mentioning Jeff Hayes, the audiobook narrator. If you've listened to any of the audiobooks, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Hayes has an incredible talent for bringing these characters to life, and once again, he delivers a top-tier performance in the Gate of the Feral Gods. His ability to switch between characters, especially when handling the wildly different personalities of Carl and Princess Donut, is nothing short of masterful. It adds a whole new layer to the experience and makes the series stand out even more in the crowded lit RPG and progression fantasy genres. If you haven't given the audiobooks a try, you're truly missing out on a fantastic production. Now, the not so great parts. For me, this book felt like it had too much going on. As much as I love fast-paced action, there's a point where the story becomes so packed with big moments that it stops being impactful. In the Gate of the Feral Gods, the sheer number of events, side quests, and plot twists felt overwhelming. It's as if every few pages the stakes were being raised, a new challenge introduced, or a major revelation dropped without giving us much time to absorb any of it. As a reader, I found myself wanting the story to slow down at times, to give us a chance to really sit with the characters and the world, and to appreciate the gravity of what's going on. This brings me to one of my main issues with the book, and it's also an issue I had with the third book, and it's the pacing. While some readers might love the rapid-fire progression from one big moment to the next, I personally prefer when the story takes its time to breathe. Books 1 and 3 in the series, books 1 and 2 in the series had a more balanced rhythm, with moments of intensity interspersed with quieter, more reflective scenes that allowed the plot to unfold at a more natural pace. In the Gate of the Feral Gods, it felt like we were being rushed from one climactic event to the next, and it became harder to connect with the story as a result. At times, it felt more like a setup for future books than a self-contained narrative, which left me craving more depth in the current story. Additionally, because there's so much going on, Some of the character interactions that made the earlier books so engaging took a bit of a backseat. One of the things I love most about the series is how much time we spend with Carl, Princess Donut, and the various side characters who join them on their journey. But in this book, many of the side characters felt a bit underdeveloped. Some would show up briefly, only to disappear again without much fanfare. This made it harder to form emotional attachments or invest in their fates, especially when compared to the more memorable companions we've had in the previous books. Ultimately, the constant barrage of action and new development made The Gate of the Feral Gods feel more like a transitional book, one that's setting the stage for something bigger down the line. While that's not necessarily a bad thing, it left me feeling like I was missing some of the deeper connections and character moments that made earlier entries in the series so strong. It's not that the book is bad, it's just that, for me, it didn't quite hit the same notes as book 1. So why should you read The Gate of the Feral Gods? Even though this installment didn't check every box for me, there's no denying that the Dungeon Crawler Carl series as a whole remains one of the most entertaining and addictive entries in the lit RPG and progression fantasy genres. If you're into these kind of stories where characters evolve and acquire new abilities and battle increasingly tough challenges, then this book and the series offers a lot to keep you hooked. Let's start with the obvious, the action. Whether you've been a fan from the beginning or you're just jumping in, the sheer intensity and the creativity of the battles and quests in this book will grab your attention. One of the hallmarks of this series is its ability to consistently raise the stakes. With each new floor, new biome, and new enemy, the threats become bigger and badder, and Carl and his companions have to come up with increasingly clever strategies to survive. There's always a new power-up or ability waiting around the corner, and for fans of video game style progression, this is a major draw. The pacing, while a bit too fast for my liking at times, could actually be a selling point for a lot of readers. If you enjoy books where things happen at breakneck speed, then there's hardly a moment to catch your breath. And this one will definitely deliver on that front. You won't be bored, that's for sure. Every chapter introduces something new, whether it's game-changing pieces of loot, a deadly new monster, or a twist that completely upends the team's plans. That kind of relentless energy is perfect for readers who crave action-heavy stories where the plot keeps charging forward. Another reason to dive into The Gate of the Feral Gods is its world building. One of the things that Dinniman does incredibly well throughout the series is layer his universe with more complexity in each book. By the time you reach this fourth installment, you're getting a deeper sense of the dungeon structure, the otherworldly forces behind it, and the larger conflict at play. If you're a fan of the lit RPG genre already, you'll appreciate how the game mechanics are seamlessly integrated into the plot while still managing to flesh out a rich, imaginative world that feels unique. And let's not forget the characters. That's the entire reason I stay. Even though I wished for more development of side characters in this book, the central duo, Carl and Princess Donut, are still engaging and entertaining as ever. Their dynamic continues to evolve, and if you follow their journey from the beginning, you'll appreciate how far they've come, both in terms of their relationship and their individual growth. Carl's determination and grit are still very much the heart of the series, while Princess Donut's sass and surprising depth keep things light when they need to be. It's this balance of humor and darkness that keeps readers invested. And even when the plot itself might feel chaotic, again, that's the reason why I'm here. For those who love audiobooks, this series is a must listen. I've mentioned earlier, Jeff Hayes just knocks it out of the park once again with his narration. His ability to bring the characters to life, especially in more comedic or intense moments, adds a whole other layer to the experience. And if you're someone who enjoys audiobooks that feel more like full productions with voice acting that elevates the materials, then the series is going to be right up your alley. And with Sound Booth Theater's full cast recording of the first book, there's even more to look forward to if you want a more immersive audio experience. And While The Gate of the Feral Gods may not hit the same highs for me as earlier books in the series, I can absolutely see why this could be a favorite for others. The sheer variety of biomes, the creativity behind the challenges Carl and his team face, and the high-octane plot make this a thrilling entry. If you're someone who loves unpredictability and constant twists, this book is going to keep you on your toes. In the end, the reason you should read The Gate of the Feral Gods is because it's a crucial part of a much larger, deeply imaginative, and highly entertaining series. Even if this particular book didn't hit every high note for me, I'm still invested in where the story is heading. I want to see how the stakes evolve, how the characters grow, and ultimately how Carl and his companions navigate this crazy, dangerous, and often hilarious world. If you come this far in the series, I think you probably feel the same way. In the end, while this book isn't my personal favorite in the series, I still had a good time reading it. It's a wild ride, and it's clear that Dinniman is setting up something huge. While I'm still interested in the journey, my affinity for the series is starting to slow down. I've come to love these characters, whether I'm rooting for them to succeed or hoping they meet a gruesome end. But is that going to be enough to keep me going? I guess we'll see. If you haven't started Dungeon Crawler Carl yet, now is a great time to do so. Book 7 comes out on November 11th of this year, and even if I didn't like the last 2 books as much as the first 2, this is an incredibly fun and unique series, especially if you enjoy audiobooks. And that's it for today's review, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, happy reading.